The Stanford Business School motto is one that I really subscribe to and admire. It is change lives, change organizations, change the world. But if you are going to change lives, change organizations, and change the world, you need power. Because if the world were going to change without power, it would have changed already. You need influence. And if you're going to be effective in changing lives, changing organizations, and changing the world, you have to understand the psychological dynamics. You have to change the mechanisms. If you and I are going to try to get from here to the moon, we have to accept the reality of gravity. We can't pretend it doesn't exist. If you and I are going to start off on a rocket, we have to understand something about the laws of thermodynamics and rocket fuel. So you have to begin, if I'm going to drive from where I am, which is 16 miles south of San Francisco, to the city of San Francisco, I have to know what the path is. I have to know what the obstacles are that I'm going to face on the way. I have to understand traffic conditions. Doesn't mean I have to like them, but I have to understand the reality if I'm going to change the world.
And we are live. I am delighted to say I'm here with Jeffrey Pfeffer, not Pfeiffer, Jeffrey Pfeffer. He is a professor of the Stanford Graduate School of Business, and he's the author of this book, Leadership BS and Power, which I've had the pleasure of reading in preparation for this interview. I'm so excited to have you here because this podcast has very much been dedicated to the human element in leadership. We've had Raj Sisodia talking about conscious organizations and the healing organizations. We've had Bob Chapman talk about Everybody Matters, his book Everybody Matters, and this concept of whole human leadership and a caring orientation to leadership. We recently had Marcel Swantes talking about love in the workplace. We've had Amy Edmondson talking about the importance of psychological safety. And I've got this feeling that you're going to give me somewhat of a corrective to this narrative about leadership and what makes a workplace performant and a place where humans thrive. And I'm just very much looking forward to your take on leadership and what it looks like in reality. So big welcome, Jeffrey.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I know almost everybody you've mentioned quite well personally. And so I would begin by pointing out that what they are talking to you about is exactly how the world ought to be. I'm a big fan of Bob Chapman. I wrote a book called Dying for a Paycheck, which and he and I have talked about the workplace and human health and human thriving. I know Amy and her psychological safety work, and certainly Raj's work on building organizations where people can thrive is amazing. There is a normative component to how leadership ought to work. Unfortunately, in case no one has been reading the newspaper recently, it doesn't always work that way.
Right. Yeah. So and I actually, in preparation for this podcast, I was somewhat conflicted because there's a part of me that thinks, well, okay, that's normative, and we've got this claim that the workplace ought to be like that. Well, isn't that a good thing? Or shouldn't we stand up for a more virtuous vision for leadership in the workplace? Or rather, as you suggest, is it better for us to accept the world as it is and orient ourselves to that reality and work on our leadership strengths vis-a-vis the world as it is? And I suppose that's what you're saying, right? We take the world as it is and orientate according to that.
So the Stanford Business School motto is one that I really subscribe to and admire. It is change lives, change organizations, change the world. But if you are going to change lives, change organizations, and change the world, you need power. Because if the world were going to change without power, it would have changed already. You need influence. And if you're going to be effective in changing lives, changing organizations, and changing the world, you have to understand the psychological dynamics. You have to change the mechanisms. If you and I are going to try to get from here to the moon, we have to accept the reality of gravity. We can't pretend it doesn't exist. If you and I are going to start off on a rocket, we have to understand something about the laws of thermodynamics and rocket fuel. So you have to begin, if I'm going to drive from where I am, which is 16 miles south of San Francisco, to the city of San Francisco, I have to know what the path is. I have to know what the obstacles are that I'm going to face on the way. I have to understand traffic conditions. Doesn't mean I have to like them, but I have to understand the reality if I'm going to change the world.
Right. Okay. Well, that's a great place to start then. So what is that? What is the reality as you see it in terms of the workplace and the leadership roles within it?
Well, the reality is that in most organizations, there will be natural differences of opinion because of disciplinary background and the information to which people are exposed. So the engineers aren't going to think like the marketers. The marketers aren't going to think like the finance people. The finance people aren't going to think like the HR people. There's differences of opinion in organizations. There are differences of opinion about the direction we ought to be going. There are differences of opinion about how we ought to go there once we agree on a direction. And the way those differences of opinion get resolved is through interpersonal influence.
Right. Okay. And if that's the currency of leadership in the workplace is interpersonal influence, what do we have to take into account then as leaders? And what are our means of achieving influence in the workplace?
So I would begin by understanding fundamentally human psychology. I actually believe that almost all, not all, I said almost all, because I'm careful to qualify myself here, almost all human behavior can be derived from a very, very simple idea, which is that people like to think well of themselves. This is called self-enhancement. There is a famous series of studies called the above average effect, where if you take a group of people and ask them, about any positive attribute anonymously, of course, are you above average in intelligence, height, good looks, sense of humor, etc., more than half the people will say they're above average. Well, if you are motivated to think of yourself as above average, you are motivated to think that everything you touch is better for you having touched it. This is why we don't delegate as much as we should, because every decision we make is better than decisions that we don't make, because after all, we're wonderful people. And when we intervene, we have a positive effect. It is why we're motivated to hire people who are similar to ourselves, because if we love ourselves, we love people who are us. There's a classic New York Times article by Benedict Carey, Carey, entitled "You Remind Me of Me," and talks about the ego bias, the egocentrism, the fact that we love things that remind us of ourselves. We love our own birthdays. We love our own images. I still remember, this is a fabulous story. I was going in for back surgery on my lower back. You put your face down in this halo because they want your back arch so they can get at it easily. And so you're now basically looking at the floor. And as I began to put my face down, I said, I wonder what I'm going to be looking at. And of course, what they did is they gave you the best thing possible to look at. They put a mirror there. So you look at yourself. What is better than that? So, so we love things that remind us of ourselves. We love, we are attracted to people who are similar to ourselves. We love our own in-groups. We are susceptible to flattery, because when somebody flatters you and says, you're the greatest podcaster in the history of the universe, you can say either this person's trying to manipulate me, or you can say, which by the way makes both you and the person look bad, or you can say, here's someone with an enormous amount of insight and perspicacity. So you can you learn the principles of influence. You read Robert Cialdini's book on influence. You learn how people are influenced, and that's how you engage in leadership. You get people to do what you need and want them to do.
Right. And this isn't about building a connection with them, being authentic.
Oh, God, no.
Seeking to empathize with them.
No.
That's all BS.
No, that is it. You don't want to be authentic because, let's say you're my boss And let's say my authentic feelings toward you is that you're the biggest pain in the ass I've ever met. I don't want to say to you, by the way, you're the biggest pain in the ass I've ever met. This is not going to get me. This is not going to help me build a relationship with you. This is going to help me get you to do what I need you to do to make my career successful. No, you don't want to be authentic to your feelings for that individual. You want to be authentic to what that individual needs from you. The individual may need confidence. The individual may need a sense that that if I do what I'm telling you to do, we will be successful.
Right. So
this is extraordinarily. You're laughing. I don't know. To me, this is extraordinarily pragmatic.
It is extraordinary pragmatic. You're right.
You go into the world and you got to get people to do what they need to do in order to get things, in order to make the organization successful. I've got to, if you're my friend, and he's a very dear friend of mine, Gary Loveman, who for many years ran Caesars, the casino company. You've got to have people, walk around in high heels with heavy, trays of drinks on their arm. You've got to have people who, provide a high level of service. And they've got to provide that high level of service, even if their kids are giving them trouble, even if their spouse is giving them difficulty, even if they've got financial difficulty while they're on that shift. They have to do something so that people will come back to Caesars. And your job is to motivate them and to inspire them to do that. And that means, sometimes explaining to them how important they are. And sometimes that means giving them feedback. Sometimes that, but we have a job to get things done. That's what life is about.
Right. And you mentioned in the Leadership BS book that the failure of the leadership development industry. So, and you cite that I saw one study that was suggesting it was something like $370 billion a year spent on leadership development all combined, and yet we still have this atrocious statistics in terms of people's satisfaction with their leadership at work. So it seems that your contention is it's failing. So, what do you think leadership development or leadership development as industry gets wrong, and what should it be doing instead?
Well, I think with the leadership. So I tell you a story. I went to Half Moon Bay, a beautiful town on the coast, and I gave a talk to a bunch of L&D, leadership and development managers. And I said, raise your hand if you're having trouble retaining your high potentials. Every hand goes up. I said, keep your hand up if the reason why you're having trouble retaining your high potentials is that many of your high potentials are experiencing, the euphemism is career derailment. The non-euphemism, they're getting fired, they're getting into trouble, and almost every hand stays up. And I said, keep your hand up if the reason why they are failing and getting fired and getting into trouble is because they have not mastered, the euphemism would be organizational dynamics. Every hand stays up. So career derailment is a problem. Career derailment is being caused by people not mastering organizational dynamics, political dynamics at work. Keep your hand up if you give them training on power and influence. Every hand goes down. There is the problem of the leadership industry. We recognize we're losing high potentials. High potential people that we have invested money in are failing because they have not mastered the interpersonal influence skills. We hire people on the basis of their individual skills and abilities. And if they do a good job, we promote them to a job in which management is, after all, leadership is, after all, about getting things done through other people. And we've given them precisely zero training on how you actually get things done through other people, not how you might want to, or, whatever. And we have failed to train them in the fundamental skills of power and influence. And then we wonder why they fail.
Right.
It's like I'm going to send you into the ring I'm going to send you into the ring to fight, George Foreman when he was still alive, or Muhammad Ali. I'm going to send you to play basketball with Shaq O'Neal, but I'm not going to tell you how to play the game. And then I'm
Right.
going to be surprised that you're going to fail? I don't think so.
Right. Okay, so if you were to enumerate then the key facets of the skill set of power and influence, what would they be? I know you've touched on some of them already, but what would they be?
So I wrote a new book, newer than the power book, called 7 Rules of Power. I could tell you what the 7 rules are.
Yeah, let's
which
go through that.
which is what I do and I kind of use this in my class, both online and at Stanford. The first rule of power, the first thing I would tell you to do is we need to get you out of your own way. And the first thing we need to do is get you to understand that as we learn about power and influence, you're going to go through 4 stages. The first stage is denial. This doesn't work anymore. I'm some 15th century philosopher named Niccolo Machiavelli. I'm actually not, and this doesn't happen in high tech companies, or it doesn't happen here, or that's denial, the forms that denial takes. Then you're going to go through anger, mostly at me. Then you go through sadness. This is how the world works, but I can't stand it. And finally, if we're successful, we'll get you to acceptance. We're going to get you out of your own way. We're going to have you we're going to get you past imposter syndrome. If you suffer from it, we're going to have you think of yourself as the powerful, fabulous person that you can be or that you can become. We're going to have you understand that power is a skill, that I'm not going to do gender reassignment surgery or anything else. This is not changing. I'm not going to try to change your personality. I'm going to give you a set of learnable, teachable skills that will make you more effective.
Right.
That's step 1. Step 2, I'm going to teach you to break the rules.
Go on then.
I'm going to teach you. There's no organization that has succeeded by following conventional wisdom. Amazon never followed conventional wisdom. Apple certainly never followed conventional wisdom. Donald Trump would have never been elected had he followed conventional wisdom, because if he had followed the conventional wisdom, he would not have run for president the first time, because no one would say, by the way, you're a 4-time bankrupt, 4 times bankruptcy, maybe 6, depending upon your source. You've never run for political office. Why don't you start at the top by running for president of the United States? I don't think so. Whatever. I think so. I think you need to break the rules. By the way, one spin on breaking the rules is when Rosa Parks got on the bus all those years ago, she was supposed to sit in the back. She didn't. Nelson Mandela became the father of South Africa in prison. So it's not only, and I mean, in some instances, if depending upon what the social norms and structures are, you not only have to break the rules, you literally have to break the law if you're going to accomplish serious social change. But you certainly have to get beyond conventional wisdom. So I would say that's rule 2. Rule 3 is you need to show up in a powerful fashion. We respond to people mostly on the basis of how they look and how they sound, least important by the content of what they say. Rule 4, you need to build a brand. Coca-Cola has built a brand, Mercedes-Benz has built a brand, Tesla's built a brand, Elon Musk is in the process of destroying the brand, and we'll figure out how that all works out economically. But brands are important. I mean, Tesla today, with as much trouble as it is, sells at 100 times earnings. Toyota sells at 10 times earnings.
Right. It's still 100 times. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's still 100 times. Somebody pointed out if Tesla was selling at the same PE multiple as Toyota, would be selling for $14 a share, not $250 a share, or whatever it is today. This is all about building a brand, building a mystique. What's good for Tesla is good for you. You need to build a brand. You need to build a mystique. Rule 5 is network relentlessly. If leadership is getting things done through other people, the more people the more people you have connections to, the more you'll be able to get done, the more things you'll be able to learn. Rule 6 is use your power, something that Donald Trump certainly understands. And rule 7 is probably the most controversial, which is that once you're powerful and successful, people will forgive and forget how you got there. There are 3 sources for what I'm about to say. Bill Gates stole the code on which Microsoft began. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. The New York Times was fascinated with Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, who in 2016, thought Trump was the worst possible thing ever. once Donald Trump got elected, Lindsey Graham he went from a never Trumper to an always Trumper. The New York Times is fascinated by this. They interview after interview with Lindsey Graham. How did you go from one thing to the other? Lindsey's answer, I want to be relevant. Once people are in power, you figure out how to accommodate yourself to them. So, there it is. 7 rules, 5 minutes. It's hard.
I love it. Well, I have to say,
by the way, it's easy to describe. It's hard to do. So one of the things I say on my first day on my 10-week on-campus Stanford class called The Path to Power is I say, I can tell you everything you need to know about power in 45 minutes. It will take probably more than 10 weeks to get you to do it. Because all this stuff is so counter to how you've been trained, the leadership literature to which you've been exposed, how, what your mother and father have told you to do growing up, and I have this fabulously, fantastically amazing woman named Laura Chow, who's 6'1", the daughter of Vietnamese immigrants, a very successful venture capitalist. She said, when I was growing up, I was taught by my Vietnamese parents, keep your head down, do good work. Deborah Liu, very senior executive in Meta now. Then she ran Ancestry.com as a CEO. Again, Asian woman in the South, raised in the South, taught by her parents. Hard work, keep your head down, don't stand out. If you don't stand out, nobody is going to promote you if they don't know who the hell you are. And so Deborah Liu has now written the book about power for women called Take Back Your Power. Deborah Liu's book, Take Back Your Power. I love the title. First of all, it's a great book, but the title, it's Take Back Your Power. We give power away. We say, I'm going to keep my head down. I'm not going to self-promote. I am not going to build a personal brand that seems too aggressive. I'm not going to network because that would be maybe impolite. And we do things that hold ourselves back. And my whole course, I would like to think that my class is about teaching people the social science of, interpersonal behavior. I think it is. But the biggest effect of my class is I get people to do things that they never thought they could do. And it works. And they come to me, they say, Jeffrey, I tried this and it works. It's amazing. I have a guy one day in the food line at the cafeteria at the GSB looked over at me. This is during COVID. He said, you don't know me because you taught me on Zoom. He said, your class made me rich. That's why my class is popular. Trust me, my class is not popular because I'm good looking or charming or, everybody loves me. My class is popular for a simple reason. If you actually follow these rules, you will, in fact, accelerate your career and I can make people wealthy.
Right. Okay. So I'm one of these people who's somewhere on your spectrum of denial, anger, sadness, acceptance, splitting between all of them as you describe them. The first thing that comes up for me is, where's the role of integrity in this?
There's an interesting word. So I am a social scientist. I have independent variables. I have dependent variables. I try to understand if you do X, Y will happen. Integrity is, of course, a judgment. Do you know Matthew 7, the New Testament? Judge not, that ye be not judged. Do you know in the Quran it says only Allah can judge? Do you know Walt Whitman, the American poet, says be curious, not judgmental? Mother Teresa, if you judge people, you have no time to love them. One of the first things I try to teach my students is to become less judgmental, to stop making judgments. This person is a asshole, or this person is dishonest. This person has no integrity. This person is this, that, or the other thing. What if that person is on your critical path and you're not a great actor? And they know that you've judged them as being low in integrity. You're going to have trouble building a relationship with them. Sometimes organizations have put on your critical path. Sometimes the world has put on your critical path people that you have to interact with in order to change lives, change organizations, and change the world. Sometimes some of those people are low integrity. what are you going to do? You can shoot them, get rid of them if you can, but if you can't, you have to figure out how to do business with them.
Okay.
You have to figure out how to accommodate yourself in a way that maintains your personal compass, but that also permits you to build a relationship with people who, it would be wonderful if the world was filled with people like you. Then I would not have to make any compromises. Everything would be great. But the world isn't. And so
Who's saying I'm a paragon of virtue?
No, I'm sure you are. But to the extent that the world isn't filled with paragons of virtue, then you have to figure out how are you going to navigate in this world. I may want to drive from here to San Francisco, and the roads are bad because California is underinvested in highways, and the traffic is bad because even though there's not return to work, everybody's returned to driving. I could say, I can sit there in the car and say, it's horrible. California should have done a better job with its road design or with its traffic patterns or with whatever. Or I could say, I need to get from here to San Francisco. I better figure out how to do it.
Right. Yeah.
That's the analogy I would use. If you're trying to change lives, change organizations, and change the world, you're going to run into people who are low integrity. You're going to run into people who are unethical. You're going to run into situations that are obnoxious and repulsive and all kinds of things. Because you can't often, unless you're the CEO, you can't create the world in which you're living and in the world in which you have to navigate. And so you have to figure out, how am I going to deal with this? And one of the ways you can deal with it, you can say, I'm going to leave the field. You don't have to play football. It's a contact sport. You don't have to play tennis and do what the Serena sisters did. Not Serena, Venus, the Williams sisters. Venus and Serena Williams started playing tennis when they were little kids, spent tons of time practicing, got fabulous coaching. You can say, I don't want to work that hard. Not a problem.
Right. No, and I take your point on not judging others, and just from anything apart from anything else, the mental load it takes if we're constantly applying judges to everybody in our life. But what about this rule of break the rules? How do I break the rules and maintain my moral compass? How do I navigate that? Okay, so you're telling me break the rules and don't worry about it because people will forgive you in the long run, and I need to maintain the current moral compass. How does that work?
I don't teach. Look, I'm very clear about what I know and what I don't know. If you wanted surgery, if you wanted neurosurgery, you would not go to a urologist. If you wanted help for your kidneys, you probably wouldn't go necessarily to a neurosurgeon. I am not an expert on ethics. I am not an expert on moral philosophy. I am an expert on social science. I know what I know and I know what I don't know. And therefore, I am not going to try to tell you this. I will tell you that there's an enormous body of literature that suggests that training in ethics is strikingly ineffective. And that's because I train you in ethics in the classroom and you run into ethical dilemmas on the job. And therefore, you have to remember your classroom training and figure out how to apply it in that situation, which is why training in ethics actually doesn't work very well. I would hope that your parents, that your religious, your spiritual upbringing would permit you to figure out how far do I want to go, and maybe you want to push the boundaries a little. Maybe you want to, whatever. Maybe you want to be a little more self-promoting than you think is good. Maybe you want to be a little more flexible with the people you deal with than you originally did. I don't know. I mean, this is something that each individual has to decide for themselves. Just as if you said to me, suppose I don't want to work that hard. Most CEOs I know, most high-level executives spend a lot of time working. Many of them have traded off, family commitments for professional success. I cannot tell you how to make that trade-off. I could tell you tell you what the evidence is the relationship between work hours and pay, and there is in fact a relationship between work hours and pay. I wish there weren't. But I can't tell you, you need to work more hours in order to make this much more money. This is up to you. You have to make your own decisions about what you are willing to do. I'm not going to give you prescriptions. I'm not a preacher, an imam, I'm not your mother or your father. I'm going to tell you how the world works. I'm going to let you figure out how to use that knowledge in a way that is comfortable to you.
Right. And I think this is one of your critiques of the leadership sort of literature in general, isn't it? That it takes on a normative stance. It comes across as almost religious, right?
Okay. It comes across as preachy only because it is.
And I suppose that is to some extent because we feel that leadership, well, this is my assertion now. I believe that there's some validity to that because I'm asserting here that leaders in society have at some level a moral obligation to demonstrate virtuous behavior to the rest of society. That's part of the privilege of their position. Is that incorrect?
It is obviously empirically incorrect.
Yeah.
Because all you got to do is look at the leaders. And by the way, I'm not just talking about political leaders. I'm talking about many business leaders. So I am a big, I wrote a book called Dying for a Paycheck. I have enormous admiration for Bob Chapman and the idea that what happens to you at work affects your life outside of work, affects your relationship with your significant other, affects your relationship with your children. Bob Chapman has a view that when you go to work, you have entrusted your well-being to your employer, and your employer has a responsibility to send you back at the end of the day in at least as good condition, if not better condition, than when you arrived at the workplace. And to which I say, amen. Thank you. Bob and I are both actually born in St. Louis. We're good friends. I know him well. And I would ask you the following question. I think that is exactly your moral responsibility. You are stewards of the lives that are entrusted to you. And I would ask you, look around the world. How many organizations are being good stewards to the lives that are entrusted to them? Meta, which is laying off tens of thousands of people, even though it's got more money than God. Google, which is doing the same thing. And we know that layoffs lead to death, literally. When you are laid off, your risk of suicide goes up 2.5 times. Do we have organizations that are working people to death? Absolutely. Are they being good stewards? Absolutely not. Should they be? Of course not. But if you're going to change lives, change organizations, save the world, you're going to need power to do it. Because yes, you can look at the world and say the world is a catastrophe. And in many ways it is. We are ruining the climate for our generations to come. We are certainly doing a bad job of taking care of the human psychology and physiology that has been entrusted to many workplaces in this world. Is that a good thing? Absolutely not. Does everybody matter? To use the title of his book? Yeah. Absolutely. Should capitalism be more conscious? To take the title of Raj's book? Absolutely. Is it? No. So I can pretend that everything is peachy keen. It's not. Or I can say, how are we going to make the change that we need so that, in fact, organizations will be better stewards of the human beings whose lives are entrusted to them? And that's going to require power and influence.
Right. Right. I get that. It's Bob can change the world because he's adept at wielding power of a very large organization.
Bob can change. Well, Bob and I have a difference of opinion about whether or not Bob can change the world. Bob can, as long as he's alive, change the world of Barry Waymiller and change the lives of the people in Barry Waymiller, which is, by the way, a sacred task. And God bless him for doing it. Bob and I believe that he is good. I disagree with Bob. I believe Bob has not done the best job he could, but he's done a pretty good job of ensuring that when Bob goes to heaven, because that's where he belongs after he dies, that the culture he's built will in fact survive. My friend George Zimmer of the Men's Wearhouse said that when he got thrown out of his executive chairman role in 2013, said to me, it took me 40 years to build the Men's Wearhouse. It took them 6 months to destroy the culture. Herb Kelleher, Southwest Airlines is not what it was when Herb Kelleher was there. So I think one of the things that the leaders that we admire need to do is to worry about ensuring in every way possible that what they have built survives their departure.
Right. And is there not a case to be made to say, teach leaders these skills, teach leaders the ability to gain power and influence, and encourage them to develop their own characters and develop their virtuous nature? Is this not a both and?
I think it is a both and, but developing their own characters and developing their virtuous nature is too abstract for me. I don't like abstractions. I will tell you something. A single item measure of self-reported health prospectively predicts, even controlling for people's physiology, their mortality and morbidity. Organizations are giving out surveys all the time. Measure people's self-reported health and hold yourself accountable for that. Don't talk to me about virtue. Talk to me about people's well-being. We can measure people's health. We can measure people's behavioral and physical health. And I think organizations ought to measure that and hold themselves accountable for that. Virtue's too slippery a concept.
Right.
I want to keep people alive.
Sure. Okay. But that makes sense as a metric for the organization. But of the individual leader, I mean, do you take, well, perhaps you don't take the case that somebody can improve the level of their virtuousness, put it that way?
I'm sure people can improve the level of their virtuousness. I don't know how to do that. I know how. Okay. I do know how to improve your power skills, and I do know how to make you more powerful. How to make you more virtuous, I don't know. Let me suggest to you, however, that this is harder than you think, and it's harder than the leadership literature thinks. We have organizations that are set up to do this. They're called organized religion, and they've been trying for literally thousands of years with lots of skill and lots of good intention. And I am in no way criticizing these organizations for their good intentions, but they have, for the most part, not succeeded. So if the Catholic Church can't do a perfect job of creating virtue with all of the things that they've got and the resources that they've got and the knowledge that they've got, the idea that I'm going to do a better job than the Catholic Church, I'm not going there.
Right. Okay. No, I take that. It's really very difficult. And I know that from my own person, because I've done an enormous amount of work on myself to become, like, quote, a better human. And it's laborious, and it takes a long time.
And the difference is that you want to do it. So you're telling me I need to create virtue, not just among people who want to be virtuous, but we need to create virtue and better behavior among a bunch of people, some of whom actually don't want to be.
That's true. That's very true. Most people, but yeah, I don't know what the stat is, but yeah.
So therefore, it's going to be a really hard job.
So but what you are saying is give everybody these skills, and at least some of those will be virtuous people and can wield that newfound power.
Yeah. Well, in 7 Rules of Power, the book begins with a quote, which is attributed to me. I'm not sure I actually said it, but I will take credit for it. If power is to be used for good, more good people need power.
Right.
And it's really as simple as that. And, and many people say, I don't want power because I see power misused, and I see power corrupting people, and I see power being used for ill. And therefore, I don't want it. And therefore, you will leave it in the hands of people who shouldn't have it.
Yeah, that's a brilliant insight, isn't it? That's power. It reminds me of that quote, when good men knew nothing, right? Like, you can be a good man, but if you're not doing anything in the world, it's not much help to the rest.
If a tree falls in the forest, there's no sound, or nobody hears the sound anyway.
Right. Your point about showing up powerfully, reminds me of my mum used to say this, and she said this as a pejorative. People who go around with a trowel in one hand and a trumpet in the other. I mean, that was the worst type of human as far as my mother was concerned. And that deeply.
We have to overcome your mother's training.
No, exactly. But I'm just excited here, and it's so I completely get the personal brand point, and name a powerful leader who hasn't built a personal brand. But how do you work with people who, find that very uncomfortable and this idea of I need to promote myself more?
So one of the things that I do is I say to them, so I have been able to acquire through, we won't describe how, a set of executive coaches who work with both my online course and my on-campus course. So one of the things that happens when you sign up to take Pass the Power at Stanford Graduate School of Business, we assign you an executive coach. I have 6 of them, 3 for each section. I've had, in the 7 years I've worked with executive coaches, precisely 0 turnover. It's hard to get into my class. It's actually harder to be a coach for my class. On the first day, I tell them that they are exceptional executive coaches they'll be working with. Everybody looks at me and they roll their eyes. At the end of the class, they come up to me and they say, my coach was extraordinary. I said, yes. If they weren't extraordinary, you wouldn't be working with them. So I tell people, that's what you use a coach for. How do you become a better tennis player or a better golfer? You get coaching. How do you become a better basketball player? You get coaching. I have a friend who's a golf pro. He's now, retired a long time ago. He's written books on golf. He will tell you the golf swing is unnatural. It's unnatural the way you hold the club. It's unnatural how you move your arms. It's a completely unnatural motion. I'm not going to try to repeat his insight because I don't remember it that well. But I can tell you that the golf swing is unnatural. How do you become a better golfer? You practice. You practice and you get coaching. And that's how you become better at anything. That's how you become a better leader. That's how you become more powerful. I set you up to work with these coaches to provide you intense levels of feedback, to hold you responsible. And at the end of the course, people are transformed. Trust me, nobody takes this class because I'm cute or they like me. They take the class because it's transformational. And it's transformational because I give them coaching. I give them a set of assignments that cause them to have to do what they originally uncomfortable doing. Name 10 people who, if you knew them, you would be better at your job, better in your career. How are you going to meet them? Go meet them. What are you going to do? What's your personal brand statement? Get feedback from your colleagues and peers. Refine it. You can practice showing up. Robert De Niro was not born a great actor.
Right.
Julia Roberts was not born a great actor. Acting skills are learned. Learn it. Practice. Stand in front of the mirror. Give yourself experience. Join Toastmasters. Do whatever it takes. Get coaching. Get feedback. Practice. And that's what we do in the class. We explain to them what they need to do. We explain to them why they need to do it. We explain to them the psychological theories that underlie all this, and then we give them practice.
Yeah.
And at the end, they are transformed if they do it.
Yeah, I love that. I love the golfing metaphor because anybody can learn to swing a club. All right, not everyone's going to become Tiger Woods, but wherever you are, you can learn to swing a club.
You can become better. You can't necessarily become a professional, but you can become better than your current level.
Yeah. Wow. This has been so... I tell you what, you're an absolute embodiment of showing up powerfully, Jeffrey.
I doubt that. I doubt that, but I do have a lot of energy. Many people are surprised considering my age that I'm still alive, but whatever.
And you're using your power. I mean, you really are demonstrating it. And
Thank you so much.
And you break the rules, right? You're saying all this stuff about leadership. There's sort of...
I break the rules all the time. All the time. I just had a colleague who was denied tenure, and I broke the rule by pointing this out on LinkedIn and getting 440,000 comments. And tomorrow I get to meet with the dean, who's not happy. But on the other hand, he's also, I think, properly, he wants to de-escalate because I think he's terrified. Yes, he should be.
I love it. And well, it's funny. We should come back to integrity. You are walking your talk.
That's of course.
100%.
I'm a very good friend. If you're my friend, I will stand up for you and try to take care of you as best I can.
Yeah.
And if you're my enemy, I will try to destroy you using every means possible.
Wow. Well, this has been like a shot in the arm. This is great. I feel the power.
Good. Excellent.
Jeffrey. So I'm feeling energized. I'm ready to go be an even more powerful version of myself in the world and
I love
amp
it.
myself up and toot my horn.
I love it.
Let's go.
Well, I'm sure your podcast is successful, not because you put it out in the world and didn't tell anybody about it.
No, I had to go for my own version of what you've described on your program just to get the podcast out there, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
Does that make you an unvirtuous person? I don't think so. I mean, if you have content, you want to get and you've got great content. Your great content does no good if the only person who knows about it is your immediate family and your mother. I mean, you in fact have to promote yourself. You have to promote the content. You have to promote the podcast. This is not make you some kind of evil, horrible person. I mean, why do a podcast if nobody listens to it?
Well, I tell you what the irony is. Well, maybe it's not an irony, but Jeffrey, if I want to get this message, this normative message of leaders being more virtuous in the world and creating thriving workplaces, the way I do that is by increasing my power in the world. Right?
That's exactly correct. That's where we began. That's where we began 40 plus minutes ago with the fact that if you want to change lives, change organizations, and change the world, you need power and influence to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess there's going to be a lot of people out there who have this icky relationship to power that immediately figures come to mind, and we, the abuse of power comes to mind, and I think collectively as leaders we got to get over that. Those of us working in the leadership industry, especially, I see your message. Get over that. Power can be used for good or bad, and if you want good in the world, then you need powerful people to make it happen.
Yeah,
brilliant. All right. Thank you, Jeffrey. This has been absolutely awesome.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure being with you.
It's been a pleasure. You're so entertaining. Why aren't more management writers as entertaining as you are, Jeffrey?
I have no idea. First of all, I've done this a long time. I've gotten better with practice, and secondly, I do follow one of my own rules. I try to never do anything that will make me embarrassed. And when I do something and I make a mistake, I will admit it. But when I do something and people don't like it, if I don't think it's a mistake, I will not apologize. I will not back down. I'm not going to let other people, I will leave your audience with a theme song. Nobody who's watching you or us will probably remember the name Ricky Nelson. Ricky Nelson was on Leave It to Beaver 1,000 years ago, and he became a rock star. And he went to Madison Square Garden and had a bad experience. And he wrote a song called Garden Party, which I highly recommend. It's actually in the book of a wife of a friend of mine. She said, I'm getting all these different conflicting recommendations. We were at dinner one night. She said, from reviewers of my manuscript, I don't know what to do. I said, take out your cell phone. Look up Ricky Nelson Garden Party. She did. Ricky Nelson and I am thanked in her book. Ricky Nelson's Garden Party has a refrain, can't please everyone, so you've got to please yourself. You need to begin. When I wrote a book with my friend Bob Sutton called The Knowing Doing Gap, he said, how will we know if the book's any good? I said, I don't know, but if we don't like it, nobody else will. You have to. Integrity is a colleague of mine who started a big company called AES, independent power producing company, said to me, the root of integrity is an integrated integral. You have to be an integrated human being.
Yeah. Well, that I completely concur with. Right. There's great truth to that. And I think it's also true that you can have great power without being an integrated integral. Right. You can.
That's correct.
Yeah. Anyway.
All things are possible. Thank you so much, Richard.
Thank you so much, for a very inspiring conversation. Now, do you mind me asking, how old are you?
Take a guess.
Well, whatever age you are, if I've got a tenth of the energy and charisma,
and
charm that you have at that age, I'll be very happy.
There are no secrets on the internet. I'm 78.
You're 78. Yeah. Wow. You're doing something. Well, you're doing a lot right. Awesome. Thank you again. It's been a delight. It's been inspiring, educational. It's been it's been a slap across the face to all my, fluffy ideas about leadership. Great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you.